From claims of healings and visions to the world's most inexplicable events, whether you're a believer or a skeptic, the truth is always worth the hunt.
EWTN Radio presents The Miracle Hunter with Michael O'Neill.
Welcome to the Miracle Hunter Radio Show on EWTN Radio. This is Michael O'Neill. I'm the Miracle Hunter. Not every week is a big miracle week, but this one was. We had two big announcements that personally I had a great interest in. And, of course, those people who have been following along know that the Vatican has just released some new norms on the judgment of Marian apparition claims and other miracles. The last document came out in 1978, and that puts this one almost 50 years out from that one. So it's been time for an update. I give presentations all around the country how the Catholic Church investigates the supernatural. And for years and years, I've been talking about this old document, these old norms, the old rule book. And I keep saying one of these days, the new one will be out, and that has just come to be this past week, and I was able to join remotely that conference from Cardinal Victor Fernandez, who released the new norms and did a question and answer session with the media afterwards. So I was grateful to be a part of that crowd. And so there are some changes that have come to be, and they're looking at perhaps saying that the bishops no longer have the right to rule on the supernaturality of an event in their diocese, and now the Pope will be the one who makes those decisions in order to streamline the process. And they'll also be changing the categories of approval. There were only 3 categories in the past, and now it's been bumped up to 6, and that's not even counting the supernatural category. So perhaps there are even 7, you might say. And so there are various things that have changed with that document, and I thought we would dedicate an entire episode today to breaking down that document. We'll be joined by, in my opinion, the top 2 Mariologists in the entire United States. That's Dr. Robert Fastiggi. He's the professor of Mariology from the Sacred Heart Major Seminary in Detroit. He is a co-author of a book with me, Virgin, Mother, and Queen, from Ave Maria Press, along with various other works. And Dr. Mark Miravalle, the professor of Mariology from Franciscan University at Steubenville. He's, of course, the author of many books himself, and he's one of the top guys to talk to with what this new document means going forward for the Church. And if that news wasn't enough, the news of this new Vatican document and being involved with that and talking to the New York Times and Washington Post and Associated Press and all the Catholic news outlets this week, the new news story that's just breaking is the new miracle that's been announced for Carlo Acutis. He's my patron saint, the patron saint of miraclehunter.com in my words, and we've interviewed his mother on our show before. And he is moving along from blessed to saint because of a miracle that will be announced coming shortly. And we're assuming the canonization will happen in this big Jubilee year in 2025. There'll be more about that in just a moment. But people who want to check out my shows, Explore with the Miracle Hunter. Champion is tonight, talking about Marian apparitions here, and this is a perfect example of the one and only case in the history of the United States. And I look at Champion, Wisconsin, where the Virgin Mary appeared to Belgian farm worker Adele Bryce in the year 1859, and it's the first and only case approved in the United States history. And so that's tonight at 6 p.m. Eastern Time. And you can also check out my show, They Might Be Saints, my other show, which is on May 29th at 8 a.m. Eastern Time, or Central Time, I'm sorry. And it's a look at the charismatic priest who pioneered the use of radio and TV to bring the rosary to the world, staging massive rallies and enlisting Hollywood celebrities in his singular mission of spreading the rosary. So that's Father Patrick Payton, of course, and that's a good one. And that's it's coming up on Wednesday, May 29th at 8 a.m. Central Time. Later in the show, we're going to be looking at the 365 Days with Mary project. For today's date, on May 25th, we've got Our Lady of the Meadow from Ciudad Real in Spain in the year 1088. And the might-be saint of the day is Blessed Antonio Keixel from Switzerland in the year 1417. And the question of the week, how will these new norms on Marian apparitions affect Medjugorje? I'll try to answer that one. That's a tricky one. And the miracle of the day is a Eucharistic miracle in Amsterdam, which happened on May 25th in 1452. Let's take a look at the miracle news. I teased this a little bit earlier in the program. We have a new miracle attributed to Blessed Carlo Acutis, which paves the way for him to become the first millennial saint. And he's an Italian computer coding teenager, as he's known for, and he died of cancer in the year 2006. And he's known for his great devotion to the real presence of Jesus in the Eucharist. And the recognition of the second miracle attributed to his intercession makes it possible that he could be canonized during the Catholic Church's 2025 Jubilee year. Now, in a decree on May 23rd, Pope Francis approved the miraculous healing of a 21-year-old girl from Costa Rica named Valeria Valverde, who was near death after seriously injuring her head in a bicycle accident while studying in Florence in 2022. Now, after the girl underwent an emergency craniotomy to reduce the pressure inside her skull, the family was told that it was a very critical situation and that she could die at any moment, according to the Vatican's Dicastery for the Cause of Saints. And 6 days after the accident, Valeria's mother went on to a pilgrimage to Assisi to pray for the healing of her daughter at the tomb of Blessed Carlo Acutis, having written a note. And that same day, Valeria began to breathe on her own, and on the following day she recovered the use of her upper limbs and partly recovered her speech. Valeria was discharged from the intensive care unit 10 days after her mother's pilgrimage and underwent further tests that showed that the hemorrhage and the right temporal cortical contusion in her brain had completely disappeared. Contrary to medical predictions, Valeria spent only 1 week in physical therapy, and on September 2nd, 2022, 2 months after her accident, she went to a pilgrimage to Carlo Acutis' tomb in Assisi with her mother to celebrate her complete healing. And so this is the miracle that was just promulgated in a decree from Rome, and this will lead to the canonization of Blessed Carlo Acutis, making him Saint Carlo. And this brings great joy to me. I consider him my patron saint of my work at miraclehunter.com because of his love for Eucharistic miracles and Marian apparitions and his computer coding expertise. I pray to him as my intercessor every single day. So I'm very excited to hear this great news of this miracle and his impending canonization. And next week we'll be interviewing his mother, Carlo Antonia, and she'll be here to tell her side of the story and her excitement, I'm sure, hearing this very rare case of a mother being able to see her son canonized by the church. So very, very exciting miracle news this week. Let's take a look at Catholic Pub Trivia. We do this every week. We ask a trivia question, give it a prize to the one with the right answer. We give out the Miracle Hunter image of the faces of Mary. And last week we talked about the question was what is found in the crown of Our Lady of Fatima, aside from the bullet of St. John Paul II. And the answer to that question is that in thanksgiving for Portugal having not entered World War II and consequently saving their men from having to fight in the war, the crown is believed to have approximately 3,000 precious stones, and it's also embedded with one of the bullets fired at St. John Paul II during the assassination attempt in Rome in 1981. He put it there in thanksgiving to Our Lady for saving his life. But the part of it that's the answer to this question is the 3,000 precious stones are there because of those men who did not have to enter World War II in Portugal. And thanks to anyone who wrote in with that answer. And we'll be sending you out the prize of the image of the faces of Mary. Now this week, since it's May, we'll be asking a question about Mary. What is the name of the legendary wedding ring of the Virgin Mary, and where is it held? Again, that question, it's a two-part question. What is the name of the legendary wedding ring of the Virgin Mary, and where is it held? If you think you know that answer and want to win the prize, the image of the faces of Mary, send me a message to questions@miraclehunter.com, and maybe you'll be the winner of the prize this week. We need to take a short break, but when we come back, we're going to be talking about that brand new Vatican document with new rules on how to judge Marian apparitions. We'll be speaking with Dr. Robert Fastiggi. Stay with us for that.
Now, back to the Miracle Hunter on EWTN. Here's Michael O'Neill.
Welcome back. You're listening to the Miracle Hunter radio show on EWTN Radio. This is Michael O'Neill. I'm the Miracle Hunter. Well, there was big news in the apparition world this week. The first document coming out of the Vatican, new norms for discerning private revelations and apparitions. The last one was out in 1978 released secretly to the bishops of the world and later made public. But it's been almost half a century before the Church has updated its norms for investigation, its rule book, as I might like to call it, on how they deal with apparitions that are claimed in a local diocese. And this was exciting news. I think the world was very interested. I myself was contacted by the New York Times and the Washington Post and the Associated Press and all the Catholic news outlets because this was such big news around the world. And it changed a lot. A lot of things have changed from the old document to the new one. And I think it's an exciting time to talk about Marian apparitions and talk about how the Church views these and how we as faithful should view them as well. Well, I'm so excited to be talking today with one of the absolute experts on Marian apparitions. He's a professor of Mariology from the Sacred Heart Major Seminary in Detroit, Michigan, and he's the co-author of a book with me. The name is Virgin Mother Queen from Ave Maria Press, and that one details 10 of the most highly approved cases of Marian apparitions in history. And so we welcome back to the program today, Dr. Robert Fastiggi.
Oh, my pleasure, Michael. How are you doing?
Wonderful. It's been a big week, hasn't it? I think you've been contacted about for articles and for commentary on this new document, and it's really kind of caught the Catholic world by storm. I was commenting earlier that I think in the National Catholic Register there were 4 or 5 distinct articles written about this already. So I think they're paying a lot of attention to this first release of a document in almost 50 years. What was your initial reaction to seeing the news that it was coming out?
Yes, well, I heard about it. I was contacted even the day before it happened by Nicole Winfield of Associated Press, and she just wanted to know background about Marian apparitions. And then the next day, I sent her some brief comments and so on. But there seems to be a lot of interest in this because there are so many pilgrims, as you know, to these apparition sites. And it shows that people are hungry for a sign of the supernatural or a sign of the Holy Spirit's intervention into human history and the Blessed Mother's motherly care appearing at certain times. So I could say my first reaction is I was happy to see that in the presentation there's the clear recognition that these events, these apparitions, and miraculous events do occur. And as it says at the beginning, this action of the Holy Spirit in human history can also reach our hearts through certain supernatural occurrences, such as apparitions or visions of Christ or the Blessed Virgin and other phenomena. And then in the press conference that I got up very early to listen to, Cardinal Fernandez clearly showed he believes and he sees the fruits of especially the major sites of Marian apparitions. So he spoke about the beauty of Lourdes, the sober piety and profundity of Fatima, and the tenderness of the devotion of Guadalupe. And of course, Pope Francis has shown belief in these great major Marian apparitions. But my impression after reading through it is, well, it seems that there's a sense that there's a need for greater caution because so many, as you know, of these miraculous events and apparitions multiply. And in the reasons for the new norm, there's a type of caution of bishops making statements that give the impression of absolute certitude that, like in Grenoble, in France in September of 1851, there was events there, and the faithful are bound to believe as undoubtable and certain. And then regarding the lacrimations or tears in Syracuse, Sicily, the decree of the bishops of Sicily said that one cannot doubt the reality of the tears, but later on the Holy Office explained that it had not yet made a decision. So, in other words, I think what was going on here, Michael, is these events, because of worldwide communications now, the internet, they are spread throughout the world so quickly, and I think the Holy See wants appropriate caution regarding these. And there also have been some cases referred to where the bishop has given approval, and then the Holy See has intervened, sometimes without people knowing, and then the next bishop is asked to overturn the judgment of his previous bishop. And they give the example of Amsterdam.
Yes.
It's not named, but that's clearly what is involved
that is the
here.
One being referred to,
talking
right?
about how it was said to be not supernatural. Then the bishop in 2002 said it shows signs of the supernatural. That in 2020, a subsequent bishop, after being urged by the Congregation for the Doctrine of the Faith to go back to an earlier judgment. So I think Dr. Miravalle could address this, but there was a little bit of an imprecision, I have to admit, and I might even write to Cardinal Fernandez about this. It said that the decision on Amsterdam earlier was constate non supernaturalitate. It shows evidence of not being supernatural.
But it's
actually
non-constat.
the judgment was the equivalent of non constate supernaturalitate. It does not show evidence of being supernatural, or the supernatural has not been confirmed. So there's a difference in that. But now these categories are no longer going to be applicable, because the judgments that will be made by the bishop are varied, and 6 possibilities could be made. But then the bishop is to always, or the ordinary, is to always be in contact with the dicastery for the doctrine of the faith. And if we have time,
I think that's one of the
just
major improvements that this document offers, is that in the past, when documents came out, it was never clear how much in communication the local bishop was with Rome. And he was sort of impelled to release documents without even mentioning that Rome was involved, or maybe they weren't involved at all. So the faithful were always in the dark as to what Rome thought of various apparitions. And there's a handful of cases still out there that have the approval of the local bishop, and we've never seen the support of Rome. So that'll be an interesting thing going forward. We're talking today with Dr. Robert Fastiggi, the professor of Mariology from the Sacred Heart Major Seminary in Detroit. And I think one of the things that I knew was going to happen, Robert, is when we looked at the old document from 1978, there were only 2 categories listed, even though there's 3 in practice, as we were just talking about. There were only 2 categories listed, so I was quite sure that they were going to kind of clean that up and come out with sort of more precision in how apparitions could be judged. And they did that, and as you said, they came out with 6 categories. If you're willing, I'd love to go through the 6 categories and talk about what are these possible judgments that a bishop could make in assessing apparitions.
Yes, well, the most positive one would be nihil obstat, which is the word used for saying in writings there's nothing that prevents it, or nothing that obstructs it from being published. Well, here, the nihil obstat would mean that the bishop, in consultation with the dicastery for the doctrine of the faith, would simply say there's no obstacle to allowing the faithful to believe and show devotion to the supernatural event or the apparition. And for this reason, the diocesan bishop could even be encouraged to appreciate the value of the spiritual reality and to promote its spread. So, in other words, that would be the most positive. The bishop issues a statement, nothing prevents the faithful from believing in this, and then he could also show personal support for it. And of course, with Fatima and Lourdes and Guadalupe, there's so much papal support to the point that we even have feast days connected with them. But that's the most positive. And then there's a second category. It says pre oculus habeatur, which would mean let it be held before the eyes, literally. So there's some positive signs, but also some aspects of confusion or potential risk. So he's to engage in a careful discernment and dialogue, and to maybe offer some clarification if needed. But so you could just issue a statement that's it's being studied, basically.
And do we have if you're willing to mention a case that we know of that lines up to any of these categories? At some point, we'll talk about Medjugorje if it could be slotted into any of these 6. Do you have any ideas for this second category, the pre oculus habeatur?
Yes. Well, I think that Medjugorje would either be the second or the third category, or really a kind of in between. There are positive signs. I mean, in the leaked document of the Ruini Commission that was leaked earlier, but it was concluded in 2014, it was recognized that there are positive signs, but also some potential signs of confusion, and also a type of skepticism about the ongoing messages being received by the visionaries, though the majority were rather disposed to believe the supernatural quality of the first 7 apparitions at Medjugorje. But since the Pope never confirmed that what the commission came out with, which was really a mixed opinion, the last judgment about Medjugorje is what the Yugoslav Bishops' Conference said in 1991, that right. The supernatural has not been confirmed. But the Pope now has allowed pilgrims to go there, so I guess it's being held before the eyes. They're keeping watch over it. But it could also be said the third category, curatur, which could be translated, it should be cared for or attended to, or let it be cared for or attended to. It mentions various or significant critical elements are noted, but it has spread widely, and there's verifiable spiritual fruits, and the worry that if it were to be prohibited, it would upset the faithful. So perhaps Medjugorje is that way, but it would seem more like the second, because based upon the commission observations, which now it was leaked out and then published in Italian, now translated on Kevin Simmons' website, yes. That there was the recognition of spiritual fruits, but also some potential confusion. So we'll have to see if one of those categories is applied to Medjugorje.
And we have to assume that only one category can be applied to each case. It can't be a case where the church judges to apply. So it'll be very interesting to see how Medjugorje gets slotted in. Let's go to the next one, please, Robert.
Yeah. So the next one is, this would be the fourth, sub mandato, which means under mandate or under restriction, we could say. In this category, the critical issues are not connected to the phenomena itself, which is rich in positive elements, but a person, a family, or a group or people are misusing it. So there might be some kind of spiritual exploitation. Some people get involved. There's even some people who think the mafia is involved sometimes with these. They want to take advantage of the people's faithfulness or credulity. So there's like some serious problems, especially like if it's like one family, then some people take over. And so there might be some reasons about it that that pastoral leadership of the specific place where the phenomena is occurring is entrusted to the diocesan bishop. And so they just say, for now, it's under mandate. And then a stronger one would be number 5, prohibitor et obstructuatur, which would mean that it's prohibited and obstructed. So there's some positive elements, but there's so many critical issues and risks involved that seem to be very serious. So the diocesan bishop would say we prohibit and obstruct. He's not making a judgment necessarily that it's not supernatural, but it's saying there's so many scandals or confusions involved. It's best to just to prohibit it. A kind of pastoral prudence. This Cardinal Fernandez in the press conference kept saying, they kept using the word, in a prudential mode, or So this would be maybe there's some supernatural here, but some other elements, and we can't rule out the diabolical. Sometimes the devil gets involved to cause confusion. So the 5th is it's prohibited and obstructed. That, in other words, whatever positive event elements might have been present, the bishop discerns in consultation with the dicastery for the doctrine of the faith that it's best to prohibit and not allow this to spread or people to go. And then the most negative statement would be it's a declaration that it's not supernatural. The dicastery authorizes the diocesan bishop to declare that the phenomena is found to be not supernatural. So this is, of course, it could be because there's evidence of deception, or the visionary admits to having lied,
Right.
or credible witnesses provide elements of proof that allow one to discover that the phenomenon was based on fabrication or something like that. So, in other words, let us say there's a weeping statue, and then it's admitted that it was a fake. I mean, there was a case
where if they
in
test
Texas.
the tears and they're not in their paint, as has been in the case of some cases. And what is interesting about this document is that in the previous 1978 document, it was restricted only to apparitions and revelations. And the new title of the document refers to supernatural phenomena. So there is the ability with this new document now to study weeping statues, Eucharistic miracles, and the like, not just cases where messages are distributed through a supernatural event, allegedly. So that's a little bit of a change as well with this document.
Yes, I think this would be a positive element, Michael, because it protects the faithful from being tricked or fooled. I mean, if let's say there's a statue weeping blood, and then the tests show that it is the blood of the owner of the statue, well,
yes.
Then this is clearly a case of
or animal blood or whatever, something else. We know that's a proof positive case of it not being supernatural, and that falls into the sixth category. And now what seems to be a little lacking from this document, or is a big change, I should say, is now the local bishop isn't on the hook, so to speak, to declare something supernatural if he believes it so. And the church wants to take away from the bishop the ability to pronounce too forcefully about a Marian apparition, requiring the faithful to believe, which, as you mentioned, there have only been a couple of cases in history where the local bishop has done this, but they're concerned about it. But it will be Rome now that if it is in the judgment of the Pope, or in the dicastery in consultation, then they will come out with a constate supernaturalitate statement. But that won't happen from the local bishop. Talk a little bit about that change, please.
Yes. Well, in the press conference, Cardinal Fernandez said this is something exceptional, where the Holy Father would make a declaration of supernatural. The theological underpinning of this, with a citation in the presentation to Benedict XVI in his exhortation Verbum Domini, is the recognition that there's no absolute obligation to believe in these, even when the Church makes a positive judgment. So it can't be put on the same level as public revelation. But obviously, these private revelations have influenced the life of the Church, and often, like with Lourdes and Fatima and Guadalupe, in a profoundly positive way. But some people say, well, look, when there's someone canonized or beatified, there's declarations of miracles. So now you're saying we can't recognize the miraculous? But the point here, though, is that's under the supervision of the Pope. The dicastery for the causes of the saints operates with the authority of the Roman pontiff.
They always have when it comes to sainthood causes. The local bishop may give approval that it gets investigated by Rome, but Rome is the one who gives the final statement that allows a saint to be canonized. Well, this is a fascinating new document, Robert, and I'd like to talk again more in the future. And I think that there are numerous articles for people to digest online, but I want to get the input from an absolute expert like you on this. There's a lot more to talk about as we will go forward on this, but I'm so grateful to you, Dr. Robert Fastiggi, for joining us on today's program and for helping to break down this brand new document that has the Catholic world abuzz. Thank you so much for joining us on today's program.
Oh, my pleasure, Michael. Thank you. God bless you. Bye-bye now.
God bless. That was Dr. Robert Fastiggi, the professor of Mariology from the Sacred Heart Major Seminary, co-author of a book with me, Virgin Mother Queen from Ave Maria Press. Great reflections on this brand new document coming out of Rome this past week. This new method, this new strategy, this new rule book, you might say, for judging Marian apparitions and no longer judging their supernaturality. That will be put in the hands of Rome only. We need to take a short break, but when we come back, we're going to be answering the question of the week: how will these new norms affect Medjugorje? Stay with us for that.
Now, back to the Miracle Hunter on EWTN. Here's Michael O'Neill.
Welcome back. You're listening to the Miracle Hunter radio show on EWTN Radio. This is Michael O'Neill. I'm the Miracle Hunter. I love getting your questions. People write in from around the world with questions about miracles happening in today's world and those that have happened centuries ago. And I love getting the email questions, but I also love answering questions at presentations that I give. I travel around the country and give something like 20 talks a year at different Catholic parishes or conferences or shrines. They have me speak about miracles, and this year it's been a lot about Eucharistic miracles. Of course, this is the time of Eucharistic revival in our Catholic Church here in America, and so people find great inspiration in the stories of Eucharistic miracles and the science that's behind them. And so if you'd like to have me speak at your parish or your group or your shrine, please contact me through my website, miraclehunter.com. You can click on the Contact tab and send me a message that way, and maybe I'll be speaking in a parish in your area. So the question from this week is a good one from Jim. Dear Miracle Hunter, how will the new norms of Marian apparitions affect Medjugorje? Thank you, Jim. Well, thanks, Jim, for that question, and it's a good one. And I think there's a lot of speculation out there for the reason that these norms were written in the first place. Of course, we have the old norms that have been in effect since 1978, and some people might say that they've been doing just fine and there was no need to revise them. Other people might say there was time for an update. But when it comes to perhaps the underlying reason for why these new norms were released at the time that they were, during this pontificate of Pope Francis, we might say that it is an attempt to address the ongoing messages being released at Medjugorje, those apparitions that have been claimed since the year 1981 in Bosnia-Herzegovina by the 6 children that continue even on to this day. And the current status of the church is that going through the years, you've seen the local bishop give negative judgments. The constate non supernaturalitate, it is established as definitely not supernatural. Then in 1991, the Zadar Declaration from the bishops of Yugoslavia came out and said non constat, which means kind of a maybe. And then in 2010, the Vatican instituted this Ruini Commission under Pope Benedict, where they started looking at this, interviewing all the witnesses and various people involved. And that report has never been publicly released, although it's been leaked to the internet, and anybody can read it out there now, leaked and translated. And the Pope has referenced it, saying the document is well done, but he thinks of Mary more as his mother, not as a postmaster. But they've never taken the recommendations of this document, which says that the first 7 apparitions are authentic, and the rest going forward, it's unknown, meaning that perhaps they are legit, perhaps they are not, but it's a mixed bag, you might say. And so one of the interesting things about this new document that was released to us from Cardinal Victor Fernandez and the Dicastery for the Doctrine of the Faith this past week is in the past document perhaps gave us 3 very limited judgments from the Church, one being positive, the other one being negative, and the other one being maybe or in process. But in the new document, there are 6 categories, and perhaps there are 3 that could apply to Medjugorje. So in summary, I would say that it's possible that this new document was put out in order to give the Church the tools, or the language, you might say, to render a judgment finally on Medjugorje as it's still ongoing. So the 3 possible categories that I could see applying to Medjugorje: nihil obstat. Now this is the highest level of positive approval from a bishop, saying that nothing stands in the way, that there's nothing contrary to faith and morals. In the messages, there are no problems in any of the devotion or any of the anything surrounding that alleged apparition. So it's possible they could give that one. It doesn't comment on the supernatural character of the events, but it could say that there are no problems. You could also give this response of prae oculis habeatur. And with this response, Rome acknowledges important positive signs, also notes aspects of confusion or potential risks. In his presentation, Cardinal Victor Fernandez, he actually made mention of Medjugorje in answering questions from the journalists. And when he did so, he mentioned that there were some confusing aspects of Medjugorje, and perhaps he referenced the specific dates and times given by Mary, or the messages given for the bishops to hear. He found problems with that. So perhaps this falls into this prae oculis habeatur case, where they're saying there is some aspects of confusion or potential risks. And the third category that it could be is curatur. And the dicastery has noted several significant negative elements, but at the same time, the phenomena has already spread widely, and there are verifiable spiritual fruits. And so who knows if it will fall into that category. But in summary, I would say that these norms came out. They've given the church a new way of categorizing Medjugorje. And so this document, we don't know when it might happen, but there could be a new statement about Medjugorje, which for the first time makes use of these new categories of discernment for the church. So thanks so much, Jim, for your question. And if you have a question for the Miracle Hunter, you can send me an email to miraclehunter@EWTN.com or questions@miraclehunter.com, and maybe we'll be answering your question on the air next week. Let's take a look at the 365 Days with Mary project. We do this every week. For today's date, May 25th, we've got Our Lady of the Meadow from Ciudad Real in Spain in the year 1088. And the story goes that according to tradition, on May 25th, 1088, the Romanesque image of the Virgin del Prado came as part of the royal entourage of Alfonso VI to a small settlement called La Mancha de Pozuelo, and the locals, after the alleged appearance of the Virgin, asked that the king provide a sacred image to be venerated there. At the center of the settlement, 4 centuries later, would be called Ciudad Real. There was a small shrine of little importance built there. When in 1195 he lost the Battle of Alarcos against the Almohads, the Castilian king Alfonso VIII constructed a new church on that site of the chapel and within walking distance of Ciudad Real. And that is Our Lady of the Meadow from Ciudad Real from Spain in the year 1088. For more information on this fascinating devotion or any of the other hundreds or thousands of Marian devotions throughout the world, you can go to the website 365dayswithmary.com, pick up the book, or download the free app from the iOS App Store. That is 365 Days with Mary, Marian Calendar. Let's take a look at the miracle of the day. We do this every week now, where we look at miracles happening around the world that line up exactly to the day's date. And for today's day, we have May 25th. And there was a Eucharistic miracle that occurred in Amsterdam in the year 1345. But a century later, we have on May 25th, 1452, a large fire broke out in the church, or near the church, which left 3/4 of the city in ruins in Amsterdam. It was during this time the chapel known as the Holy Room became subjected to the flames. And strangely, the monstrance containing the miraculous host, which had been brought over to the chapel from the old church, was spared. In 1456, a new holy room was built and surrounded by a beautiful church. So that is the miracle of the sparing of that monstrance on May 25th, 1452, and that's the miracle of the day. Let's take a look at They Might Be Saints. We always like to tell you what's coming forward with sainthood causes. We spoke earlier about the great news of Blessed Carlo Acutis, the miracle attributed to his intercession. The second one will lead to his canonization sometime in the Jubilee year. And his was one of 3 miracles that were announced by Rome this past week, in addition to some martyrdom cases and heroic virtue, people being elevated to venerable. But there was also other interesting news, which was the Pope used equipollent beatification to recognize a blessed in the church, a 12th century founder. So the Pope granted equipollent beatification of the 12th century French religious Guy of Montpellier. He founded on the Hospitallers of the Holy Spirit and the Confraternity of the Holy Spirit, with a motu proprio called Fide Insensus, published on May 18th, and it bore the signature of the same day from St. John Lateran. The Argentine pontiff, he granted an equivalent beatification of the 12th century French religious Guy of Montpellier, who lived from 1160 to 1209. And with this equivalent canonization, or beatification, sometimes called equivalent, the person is recognized as blessed or saint. It's done by a simple decree of the Pope, without the regular lengthy process needing miracles. And within this document, the Pope granted orders, congregations, and communities linked to the charism of Santo Spirito in Sassia in a liturgical feast for Brother Guy of Montpellier, who founded the Order of Hospitallers of the Holy Spirit and the Confraternity of the Holy Spirit. And in this text in Latin and translated to English and Italian, the Pope responded to a request made several months ago by a delegation of Holy Spirit nuns who were received in a private audience, and to whom he had verbally promised to authorize this feast. according to the information of this website. And so, fascinating, this equivalent canonization or beatification. The Pope, as the Pope, can do whatever he wants to, and there's been a few cases throughout history where people have been elevated to sainthood through the motu proprio of a Pope. Let's take a look also at They Might Be Saints, the Might Be Saint of the Day. We talk about people on the path to sainthood. We're talking about servants of God, venerables, and blesseds, who with their feast day or death anniversary line up to the day's date. So for today, May 25th, we have Blessed Antonio Keixel from Switzerland, who died in the year 1417. Now, he was a well-educated Mercedarian friar, and he was chosen as the 15th Master General of the Mercedarians in the year 1405. And he worked to build up the interior life of its members and the financial resources they used to ransom Christians from slavery in Muslim countries. He served as a diplomat for the King of Aragon and attended the Council of Perpignan in France. He attended the Council of Constance, Switzerland. He was a great believer in the unity of the Church, and he worked to overcome the Western Schism and was chosen Bishop of Lyon in France. But he turned that down. He died on May 25th, 1417, in Constance in Switzerland of natural causes. And that's the Might Be Saint of the Day, Blessed Antonio Keixel. With one more miracle, he will become Saint Antonio Keixel from Switzerland. And for people who want to check out my television series, They Might Be Saints, you can tune in this Wednesday, May 29th at 9 a.m. Eastern Time. They Might Be Saints, Father Patrick Peyton will air. And it's a look at the charismatic priest who pioneered the use of radio and TV to bring the rosary to the world, staging massive rallies and enlisting Hollywood celebrities in his singular mission. One trivia point about Father Patrick Peyton is before Pope John Paul II, he was seen live by more people than anybody in the history of the world. The crowds were so large, so absolutely amazing. So check that one out. We need to take a short break, but when we come back, we're going to be talking more about this new Vatican document on Marian apparitions with expert Dr. Mark Miravalle. Stay with us for that.
Now, back to the Miracle Hunter on EWTN. Here's Michael O'Neill.
Welcome back. You're listening to the Miracle Hunter radio show on EWTN Radio. This is Michael O'Neill. I'm the Miracle Hunter. As we've been talking about on this program, this was a big week in the apparition world, and people who go to miraclehunter.com can check out my website and see as many as 2,500 Marian apparitions throughout Christian history that have been claimed. Much fewer have been investigated by the Church, much fewer than that, perhaps less than 30. A local bishop has made a statement of established as supernatural. And Rome has commented, shown recognition in some way, whether the building of a church, the canonization of a visionary, or establishing a feast day on a much smaller number, and maybe we put that number around 16 or so, according to my documents. And so we have the Vatican coming out with a brand new statement for the first time in almost 50 years. A statement coming out of Rome, releasing a new rule book in which bishops are to use to investigate claims of the supernatural in their diocese. And I've studied that old document, that 1978 document, for years and years. And every presentation I give, every book I write has a section about this old document. And I'm going to have to revise everything now. But it's an exciting time to talk about these changes in the church. And it's kind of this church document. And it's interesting to note, what is it, a positive change or a negative change? And I think it's important that they revise the document, but are the new additions, the changes, the new approach, is that the way things should be? Well, we're joined today by Dr. Mark Miravalle. He's a professor of Mariology at Franciscan University at Steubenville, and we're excited to get his take on this new Vatican document on Marian apparitions. Welcome back to the program, Dr. Mark.
Thank you, Michael. Joy to be with you.
And so this was a long time coming, this document. I think it's been in the works for years and years, and now it's finally coming out. And different people have theories on the motivations, whether it be Medjugorje or otherwise, for getting this document out and applying to the new apparitions, and maybe retrofit to the old ones. We'll have to see about that. But what was your sense about when you heard the news that the Vatican would be releasing a new document?
Well, I thought it's interesting because those old criteria of the three criteria of constata supernaturalitate, that it consists of a supernatural origin. Second criteria, non constat, which means the supernatural character cannot be established, but it's open to that in the future. And then the third category, constate non, essentially saying that these are not definitively not of a supernatural origin. I think those served the church pretty well for centuries. And so when there was word of it, of something coming forward, it was, obviously it's speculation until it comes out. But now that it has come out, I think that there's a positive dimension to the document. I think there's a couple shortcomings to the document, honestly. And again, I say that with full obedience to the document. It's now a norm in the church. But by the very fact that they've changed the last norms, it means norms can be changed. These are not fallible. They're not even doctrinal. Right. They're disciplinary. And so on that line, I found some elements that are positive, but also elements that I think are a little weak in terms of the full treatment of how the church examines private revelation.
And on the positive side, for me, I felt that the release of the 6 categories might be very useful for the bishop to give very precise judgments. I think in the past, those 3 categories, we might say the positive, negative, and maybe in the middle. It lacked a little bit of precision in some ways that we didn't know why it would get a non constat statement, for example, or why it would get the constat de non unless the bishop spelled it out in a very clear way in his letter. So it allows for more precision, I think. If you're willing, I'd like to go through the 6 judgments that might be possible with this new document. So the first, pre oculus habeatur, tell us what this, or the nihil absat, I suppose, it would be the first one to say, and it's maybe the most positive of all the ones that a bishop can now issue. Talk about what that means when an apparition gets that judgment.
Right. Well, it means, to some degree, while I grant that there's more specificity in this 6, I'm not sure there's more precision, but that could be something we could discuss, of course. But this first category, and some of these Latin idioms are not so user-friendly, but this is, nothing stands in the way. This is saying there's nothing essentially against faith and morals, nor are there any, major red flags, many major indications of difficulty, and therefore the faithful can go and pilgrimage. But in a real sense, Michael, that's the understanding of what Kronstadt used to be. I mean, you could say the judgment of the tree is, I think the tree is good because the fruits are good, but we're not saying that anybody has to accept this. I mean, that's been traditional church teaching regarding private revelation. But the first category is that it's nothing stands in the way. People are free to prudentially respond with veneration.
And if we move to the second category, this curatur, it should be attended to. Talk a little bit about what the meaning of that is.
Yeah, so it's kind of, pre oculis, habeatur, it's kind of, it'd be almost like saying, keep your eyes on this. That is to say, this is something to keep examining. And that's, a little bit more of a sense that, there might be more problems in this category, but there still is enough that would justify, some positive devotion. And so, again, this is like another shade of, we're not saying it's authentic. We see this more problematic than the first category, and it may take the bishop to intercede with the visionaries. Once again, just as a comment, that was always the case. I mean, the bishop, I think, Michael, sometimes people get the idea that, Lourdes was squeaky clean or Fatima was squeaky clean. And there were 6 to 10 false visionaries at Lourdes between the 15th and 16th apparitions at Lourdes when a true thing was happening. So there's always a sense where it's not going to be immaculate. But anyway, this is the category that grants more potential confusion or difficulty, but still allows for significant veneration, devotion.
And then the third category, curatur, it should be attended to. Is Medjugorje a classic case of this one?
Yeah, let me just mention. I mean, what it's describing is the idea that there is something that has led to a more widespread devotion and response to this, but that the bishop sees, or the judgment sees, serious problems, but not to upset the people of God. It won't be banned. And I find some problems with that biblically, because quite frankly, and what the document lacks as a foundation is the one statement Jesus says about false versus true visionaries, which is, you'll tell them by their fruits. This is, Matthew 7:15 through 20. And so this seems to imply, well, there's international verifiable fruits or widespread, but there's serious problems, therefore we won't ban it. And I find that to be a bit of a challenging, because if it's authentic, if you're having international fruits, then there's got to be something of the Spirit in there that's significant. So I find that a little bit troubling in terms of mixing of the foundations. I personally would not put Medjugorje in this category. I think Medjugorje deserves a higher category than this. And again, that's why I'm not sure these will necessarily serve with greater precision, although the document's very clear you could change from one category to another in time.
Very good. And then the next category, submandato, maybe it's saying it's got problems. It's now under a mandate. What is this submandato category?
Yeah, and again, the names are not necessarily clear to what they're trying, I think, to articulate. And that's the case where you can have positive elements, but someone can take it, a person, a family. Let's use this example, and you'll excuse the Irish reference, Mr. O'Neill, but let's say an Irish pilgrim goes to Lourdes, and they have an experience, but they come back to Ireland, but they do a inappropriate spreading of Lourdes, or they manipulate through Lourdes, or in some way they abuse the truth of Lourdes. Well, then Lourdes would be declared sub mandato, under command. But again, I find that logically challenging, because it would not be Lourdes that should be under command, but the aberration that should be under command. But that's what the category is intended to do, is that the bishop's responsible for aberrations even that extend beyond regarding a particular apparition.
And the next category, prohibitur et abstruetur.
So this is prohibit and obstruct. Mm-hmm. And so this is where the dicastery directs the bishop to make a statement simply saying, you should not have any involvement with this. There should not be any spreading of devotion, whatnot. Again, I'm a little hard-pressed to see the reason for two condemnation categories. I mean, this is the fifth saying, okay, this is so bad that a bishop's going to say, stay away from it. But then you have the sixth category, which is a more of a final-ish statement of
now
saying,
it's the constate non.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. So this is kind of resorting to the older category of saying, well, there's some type of hoax or some type of manipulation behind this, and therefore we declare it not to be of God.
It's something very clear and obvious, the admission of a visionary, or something in the testing of a weeping statue, for example, the blood being paint or otherwise, that they say this is clearly a hoax. And we have a handful of these six that exercise caution, but what has been taken away from their bishop is the ability to declare that something is truly supernatural now that hot potato is taken over by Rome itself. Talk about that change, that the bishops will no longer, and maybe they'll be more speedy in their judgments. I think that's the intention. Talk about this change of taking the decision of supernaturality and putting it in the hands of Rome.
Right. So first of all, and really that's the most foundational change in this document, is that the local bishop, not even the dicastery, can make a declaration of supernatural character. Again, I have to question whether that's really following the more biblical norms of examining tree and fruit. So now you're saying the bishop can't say it's supernatural, but you can do these other gradations. I personally don't see that as a positive, because people naturally ask the question, is it true? And who's better to make that call than the bishop, in conjunction with the DDF. So I don't necessarily see that as a progress. And my concern is that it gives an overall impression to the faithful that we kind of want to be a little bit more skeptical and negative about private revelation. In fact, when the document quotes Pope Benedict XVI, for example, he does a very nice balanced section in Verum Domini. They talk about how you don't have to believe this as authentic, as part of faith, which we've always held, but they omit his beautiful treatment about saying, don't private revelation lightly. It can be a great service to the church. It can lead to people returning to the gospel. It's really a very balanced statement, and that's what I don't find necessarily in this statement as a whole. And I think when you eliminate the possibility of making a positive statement about the tree, I'm not sure that gives the balance that traditionally the church has had between open and cautious. There seems to be much more focusing towards the cautious.
Absolutely. We're talking today with Dr. Mark Miravalle about the brand new document coming out of Rome relating to the judgment of apparitions and other supernatural phenomena. And let's switch gears a little bit. I thought there were very few cases in the document itself or in the commentary from Cardinal Fernandez before, during, and after his presentation. And one of those cases that were named by name was the Lady of All Nations from Amsterdam. And talking to you, Dr. Miravalle, you are perhaps the world's expert on this apparition, and I'd love to get your take on this, what was being said by Cardinal Fernandez and how he was slotting it into one of the categories that are now being proposed.
Right. Well, in fact, they don't mention it by name, but it's obvious by extension. They talk about, a place where a bishop started in 1956 with a final statement. I have to say, Michael, just again, I in no sense encouraging any disobedience to the document. It is presently a discipline of the church, which we should follow. But there are just basic errors, I have to say, in whoever prepared this for Cardinal Fernandez. First of all, they say that the statement of the bishop, the first bishop, was a final negative category. It's simply not true. He sent in a commission which had a negative decision. He himself did not agree with that, and he actually sought to have the Holy See revise it, and there's reference to that, but the Holy See said no. More importantly, it makes reference to the 1974 statement of the CDF, and this is rather important, Michael, because that 74 statement was not a constat de non supernaturalitate. For our listeners, that's that they definitively are stating that these are not supernatural. It simply was not that. It was non constava de supernaturalitate. And in the Italian and in the German and in the French, still on the Vatican website, it makes clear it was not a prohibition. It was a statement that the supernatural character, for example, in the German, says, has not yet been fixed, has not been certain, has not been established. So that's a major error in the pre-introduction of the document of Cardinal Fernandez, and again, assuming no bad intention, but it simply has to be pointed out. And then what's left out of the document is that in 1980, it's the CDF itself that responds back to Amsterdam encouraging devotion. It also doesn't include that the bishop in 1996 met with Cardinal Ratzinger, and Cardinal Ratzinger approved them, the diocese, making a statement allowing for devotion. And also in 2002, when Bishop Punt did make a declaration of supernatural character, he did so because at that time, with the older norms, there was not the mandate of consulting with the congregation. And so he did that in perfect honesty and, quite frankly, in a natural progression because the devotion was all over the world. So, and also the document doesn't say that the new statement of the bishop, the present statement of Bishop Hendricks, which you have had on your program,
right,
continues to allow for the devotion, for the prayer, the Lady of All Nations, and for prayer days, for which he attends every time. So those are rather significant.
And if it were definitively not supernatural, that devotion would be squelched. It wouldn't be allowed. Exactly.
We would have nothing to do with it. And so that's an important, error that really comes forward out of it. And it's not just with Amsterdam. They go after Syracuse, too, which was the weeping statue in Syracuse. They say the bishop came out and said it's without a doubt. The CDF said we have a different opinion. But what they don't add is that St. John Paul II then went to Syracuse and gave a homily on the cosmic tears of Mary in total support of the weeping tears. So,
and the Pope at the time actually got on Vatican radio and announced that there was a Mary crying, a Virgin Mary statue crying in Syracuse. So there were signs from Rome, from multiple popes. So it's an interesting change, of course, on that as well.
Right.
So we're so grateful to you, Dr. Mark Miravalle, for joining us in today's program, for talking about this brand new Vatican document. And we'd love to have you back to discuss this because there's so much to unpack. If you had any words of advice for the faithful who may be trying to digest all this that's coming out with this new document and how the Church will be reviewing new apparitions, what would be the takeaway for you, for people to feel at ease with the process that's now going forward?
Yeah, I would say the takeaway is remember that the Church herself says these are not infallible. So when we have cases like divine mercy, which was prohibited by the Vatican from 1959 to 1978, and then the Vatican changed its position. That happened, and you had Padre Pio, who went from condemnation to canonization. That's quite a jump, Michael, and that was also in a changing of a Vatican position. That the words of Gamaliel, I think, are the ultimate words in Acts 5, and that is, to paraphrase, if something's of a human origin, it's not going to last. But if something is of God, nothing can stop it. And, you always have to be careful of fighting something which is, in fact, of a supernatural origin, of God. So even though bishops can't declare something supernatural, it does not stop heaven from speaking supernaturally.
Absolutely. Well, we're so grateful to you, Dr. Mark Miravalle, for joining us in unpacking this brand new document. The conversation will continue. Thanks so much for being with us on today's program.
My pleasure, Michael. God bless.
God bless. That was Dr. Mark Miravalle joining us from the Franciscan University of Steubenville, talking about this new Vatican document on Marian apparitions. Fascinating stuff. And that's all the time we have for today's show. If you missed any of this episode or want to catch up on past episodes, you can go to EWTN.com/radio and check out the audio archives or download the free EWTN app. I'd like to thank our guest today, Dr. Mark Miravalle, and also Dr. Robert Fastiggi, for talking to us about that brand new Vatican document on apparitions. Check out my television series, Explore with the Miracle Hunter, Champion. I'll be traveling to Champion, Wisconsin, where the Virgin Mary appeared to Belgian farm worker Adele Bryce in 1859. This is the first and only church-approved Marian apparition in the United States. That's tonight at 6 p.m. Eastern Time. And I'd like to thank you today for joining me on Miracle Hunter, where from claims of healings and visions to the world's most inexplicable events, whether you're a believer or a skeptic, the truth is always worth the hunt. Talk to you next week.